Welcome to the Grit Blueprint Podcast.
I'm your host, Stephanie Couch. This podcast is about branding, building, and business. It also highlights the grit that it takes to be successful in business and in life. Let's get started. Welcome to the Grit Blueprint Podcast with Stephanie Couch. I am so excited to have my guest here today and friend Laura Workman. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here.
And I met Laura about a year and a half ago at an event in Fort Lauderdale. And we were just instantly friends and have seen each other once since then and talked a lot of times. And we're both entrepreneurs that came from the corporate world. So we have a lot in common. And you live in the South too, so a lot of commonalities there. And I'm really excited for our audience today to hear all of your amazing experience. You have a really cool business doing performance and leadership coaching, and you have a background in franchise. You do a lot with franchises, which I think is a great opportunity for people to get into business. So I want you to tell me a little bit about your background and who you are and what you do, and then I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty later.
So first off, I always joke and say, I feel like I came out of the womb and I was born into leadership. So I'm the daughter of small business owners. My parents were in the construction field. They now have a franchise doing, trade work. So I've always been in small business. Yep. And
We know that. I didn't realize that for a family background. You surprised me on that one.
I did. Oh, girl, I remember helping to build our house and driving a tractor to demo it. So absolutely. So that was my upbringing. I have 5 siblings. There are 5 kids total. I have 4 siblings. So just, one, it's just ingrained in me. That's all there is to it. Leadership and entrepreneurship. I became a mom at 18 years old. So I was blessed with the opportunity that, you're either going to sink or swim. Let's figure this out. Yeah. And became a mom. I've always been this entrepreneur in the making. So in my early 20s, I had a health and fitness company. I had my child in daycare. I wasn't very pleased with it. So I created a whole curriculum for children. And then since then, I've really been hyper-focused and working with organizations in leadership and supporting sales and marketing and building high performance teams. And then for myself, I got into the franchising scope as far as from an employee perspective back in about 2012, I believe it is 2010, 2012. And that's when my horizons just completely expanded, looking at franchising from a different perspective and being a part of a national brand that scaled multiple units, grew dramatically. So lots of exposure to franchising, small business, leadership.
Yeah, you born into it and then kept going. I think there's something to be said, and it doesn't take anything away from the entrepreneurs that just decide first generation to be entrepreneurs. But I grew up in a small family business. My husband actually grew up in a small family business. I do think there's something about that. It's like once you see what can happen there, even if it's not all, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like entrepreneurship is tough. And I think it was tough. It is tough. It's never going to not be tough. But once you see what can happen and some of the freedoms and the ownership that you have over things, it's hard to unknow that. And I think the whole time I was in corporate, I always had this little itch in the back of my head, but I knew there were certain skills and things that I was learning that would be very valuable for me. What do you think you took from your experience working at a corporation and obviously from your small business experience with your family to now kind of make something that's helping other small businesses and also bigger businesses really grow teams? Because that is something I think that we all struggle with, is having our own self be successful is one thing, but then when you start to be responsible for other people and even bigger teams, it gets really stressful for a lot of entrepreneurs and just business leaders. What's your best advice for that you've seen and grown through your business?
Yeah. So to start off, I truly believe this from the bottom of my heart. Small business is the heart of change. And small business owners, compared to corporations, small business owners truly have the opportunity to change the trajectory of someone's life. So thinking back to my experience, like looking at my parents as they were growing their company, and my dad, I'm at a young age, but he's like just really hitting the pavement to make sure that there's jobs and work to be able to support families,
Yeah.
and really taking ownership of that. And then fast forward to becoming a mom at 18 years old, I had the door shut on me from a corporate position, and probably they shouldn't have said this, but they made it known, the fact that I was having a child and having a child out of wedlock, that that's unacceptable for this type of an environment. And it took small business owners to really see the strengths in me and see all of the goodness, and like, this girl's got some talent, let's figure it out. And to, put me into positions where they owned my development, but allowed me to own my own. So fast forward where we're at today, the reason, there's such a gap in small business entrepreneurs transitioning from I'm a solopreneur to now a team. And
Right.
that gap right there is, I looked at, what had happened with the pandemic and how I was growing and how other organizations were growing, and small business owners were clueless. They have a lot of opportunity. I know what to do with my business. I know how to, get funding, do the processes, all of that. But how on earth do I hire people and support them and develop them? So I truly saw a gap, and the gap was moving from, I can turn on my business hat, but now I know when to be a manager and a leader and a coach. And I really, truly wanted to be that person who says, it's, let's figure this out together. Let me walk alongside you on that track, because you have the opportunity, Stephanie, and everybody else, to change the trajectory of someone's life.
Yeah, it's really cool because, like you said, when you're in a really big company, sometimes even in the best big companies, it's really easy to be a number, and they have to operate like that to a certain extent, because if they start to get into that individualism too much, the big company suffers because they're worried about one person over, 50,000 people or 16,000 people, whatever it is. But when you have 10 people or 5 people, it is really easy to see the individuals. And then I know that you mentioned strengths, which we both know I love because I'm a strengths development coach. And I really believe when I started seeing my strengths and my weaknesses and delegating for those, and then allowing other people that come into either my company or just people I'm coaching to see what their strengths are and how they can optimize those, it's like a whole new world for people when you start to do that. Because I spent a lot of time, especially my corporate job, trying to be a lot like everybody else that I kind of saw be successful. For instance, someone that really loved with strategic thinking, that was like a numbers person and a data person, and they were all in the spreadsheets and doing all this stuff. Well, that's just not me. I understand data and I'm very strategic, but I don't need that analytical side. I'm lead with influencing and executing. So when you start to optimize that in your teams, and then, like, for instance, my husband leads exactly opposite of me. So when we're side by side leading, we have all the bases covered, or most of them at least. That's what's really cool for me, is to see how you're going in and helping people see that. And then the solopreneur to entrepreneur journey, where you have a team, that's not to be underestimated, because even if you have one or two like part-time people, when you go to really having a team and you have salaries and things to pay, that is stressful. I mean, it is very stressful. What would you say to a business owner that maybe is a solopreneur and is basically capped? Because that's what I see a lot of. It's like you get to a certain place, 6 figures, maybe even multi 6 figures, and then you really need to delegate some things to where you can only do the things you can do, but you're scared to hire people. What would you say to those people that are in that situation?
I think the first thing is, one, you have to be really clear on what is your cap. Because a lot of people think that they're capped when they may not necessarily be capped, but they need a little bit of admin support just to get them to the next level. So first and foremost, I think one of the things that's really great to do is a time audit and really analyze, okay, these are my high leverage activities, that these are my strengths. It lights me up. It's nothing that's even going to wear you out. You and I have talked about this. This is where you make your money. This is your zone of genius. And then what are those low leverage activities? And then really balancing right there, how much time are we spending in each area? Then from there, being able to identify, well, what is that next strategic person or support person that is going to move the needle on these low leverage activities to kick up? And, kick up the revenue. Now I say that because I think that this is where we can fall short. Every person you bring on your team has to be directly connected to driving revenue. If they're not connected to driving revenue, and I've done it, I'll pay you $1,000 just to work on this because I feel stressed, and that's going to take the stress off of me. Yeah. Well, you've got to look at the return on investment. So moving from a solopreneur and entrepreneur is identifying exactly where you need the help. Then from there, once you've identified that, how do you measure success? And you have to define specifically what you need help on. Even if it's just like half of a standard operating procedure, people cannot function from your brain. Like I say that all the time. They also are looking for you to put on that leadership hat. You have to be so clear. This is what I need. I might not know everything, but I know that I need this. This is what success looks like to me. I need you to help me with the how, and this is where the accountability is going to come into play.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and something time audit, I think, is something we all can do. Every time I do one, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Even though I feel very successful some days, and then the next day I'm like, I don't even know what happened today. And I think we all have those moments, no matter how successful you are, no matter how driven you are. My number one strength is focus. But it can be a negative because I can get so focused in on things that I shouldn't be focused in on because I want to get it done. And I think that's a great thing. The revenue generation, that one's a tricky one, right? Because there are a lot of tasks that I guess can bring revenue in certain ways that maybe aren't traditional. If you can go do something else and it has to be done, like bookkeeping, that's not really a revenue generating task. But if you're not naturally really good at that and don't love it, outsource that, like get it out of your plate. Go make some more money so you can pay the bookkeeper. But at the end of the day, we have options now. So there's VAs, which again are not an easy thing. You have to be, this was one of my biggest lessons this year. If you have a VA, you probably need to have singular task, one or two things you want that person to do. Don't be like, fix my whole life. That is not what VAs are for. If you have an editing VA, or maybe it's an admin VA that's doing like email sorting and things like that, got to have that nailed down before you hire them, right? Because you want their skills to match what you want them to do. That was a big lesson for me. Don't just hire anybody to do something. And then the other thing is you may have some high skill people that you only need 15% of their time. That's where people like Upwork and things like that can come in, where you do just pay for projects. And then you have collaborative partners, maybe that when you need a graphic designer, that person is going to be there, but they're not on your payroll, because W-2 employees are expensive. I mean, very expensive on the business. And it's not just the salary, it's the benefits, it's the taxes you have to pay, all these things that you don't really know until you know. So VAs and Upwork and Fiverr, those people, don't sleep on that, because it can be a real asset for your business, especially when you're in that transition period going from single to, team, that fill in the gap where you're trying to get your revenue up to make sense for a full-time employee. I think that's a really big thing for small businesses.
Yeah, it's so easy for us to get into analysis paralysis. I mean, I literally just, at this point, I think my children know this, my sister, my family, they're like, oh, she's talking about her analysis paralysis. I'm like, here it is again. And you are correct. Like, we know exactly what to do, but we fall into that trap. Yeah. And the VA situation, Stephanie, I agree with you 100%. That was a whole nother ball game for me. And to teach people how to lead teams. And I was like, oh my word. And it had to come down to, when you are ready to make that move for a VA, you have to know the clarity, like you had just said, use a project management tool. And you literally, one thing that I know we'll probably dive into a lot, you have to know adult learning styles and how to effectively communicate and give them the assigned tasks. So for me, an hour before this call, I've got 3 VAs supporting. Girl, I'm in Trello. I am like very specific on the deliverables. Here's our checklist. Here's what we need. And you just have to be prepared that you can't just be like, this is my come to Jesus moment. Take the wheel. It's not going to happen that way.
Even if you hire a $200,000 a year executive to your business, that's still not going to happen. And now it might happen more than with a VA, because they can come in and do some more ownership type tasks. But they're still not going to be in here. And I think that's the biggest thing that I see solopreneurs especially struggle with, is the entire business is built around them and what they know and their skills. I mean, it's true with our businesses. Most of what we're doing is based on us and our brains. My husband helps me a ton with stuff too, but he's doing kind of other projects that are him and his brain. So at the end of the day, if it's you and your brain, you cannot expect someone, even the highest paid person you know, to come in and be able to get into your brain. So you've got to put this on paper, SOPs, those types of things cannot be understated. The other thing that I'll mention is automation. So, we're both using CRM, we're both doing some automation things. The more you can automate tasks where you don't have to involve a human, whether it's you or someone you've hired, email messaging, text messaging, reviews, all these little small tasks that need to be done, but just get kind of left behind. Those things, if you can automate them, then you have tasks that really humans need to do that. They can go in and do that. So that would be another thing. Don't sleep on the automation, and every day something new and cool comes out. Test that stuff. Don't get in analysis paralysis with those AI tools, because there's like 75,000 of them every day. But figure out one or two things that you could really find and really help your business and move the needle for you to have more time, and implement those into your business, because it really does make a huge difference. Well, I am excited to hear a little bit about your business, exactly how you're working with people. What is Thrive Performance Coaching? How are you working with leaders? And if someone wanted to come and work with you, what would that look like? What's your day-to-day look like in your business?
Yeah, I feel like I extra smile because I am so dang proud of the work that we're doing and the results and the people are impacting. So the business is created, it's there to help close these gaps that we're talking about right now. So we partner along with scaling franchisees, and we help them to optimize their operations, their management team, and really truly build their emotional intelligence in multi-generational teams. That's where my passion is. It's, we've gotten really great results. So the first thing that we do is when a client comes in, number one, we need to align that business owner truly with their core values and their core value of their organization. Yeah. So a lot of times when people come in and they purchase a franchise, they adopt the core values of that franchise and they run with it. And all of that just sits on the back burner. But we really get down to say, okay, what was the reason for this business? Where is your long-term goal? What's the exit strategy? Now let's align who you are with your organization and build out your roadmap. Then from there, we typically move into, I call it a stabilization phase. It's, that those processes, that those daily ops that really, disorganized. So we go in, we're going to optimize the operations. We define a couple of procedures that we need to work on, and we really bring the team together. Then from there, we're going to work on helping to really create success models, success scorecards, and profiles for the team members that you need to have the right people in the right seat. Now, who are those people? Let's attract them. Let's attract the clients, and then get ready to scale. And a lot of our friends, they are ready to buy the next 5 licenses of the next brands. We work on getting the infrastructure and getting them in place to do so.
That's awesome. And I think I can see how entrepreneurs, now that I am one, we get really excited when we have success. And we're like, if we just did this times 10, we would just have 10 times the success. And that kind of is true in a lot of ways. But I look at it from a construction standpoint. If the foundation is not solid, if it's really shaky and it's built on sinking sand, once you start layering, the more you layer on top, you start effed up, you end effed up, is what I say a lot of time. And when you have a smaller business, it's easier to hide those sins, because if things aren't running smoothly, like, someone can go in there and see it quicker. The bigger it gets, and I even saw this in a corporation, I think it's true a lot of times with big businesses, is the bigger it gets, the harder the monster is to move, and the ship is really hard to turn because it's so large. So it is just absolutely paramount for these small businesses that are going to scale to get these things checked off and get them right up front. And I see that a lot with my business on the marketing side, the sales training, even some of the things that I'm doing with people, a little more traditional, like operations. Hey, how many door machines do we need? How do we scale, with this product line? Those kind of conversations come up, and it is a big jump to go from like a 10 million to a 50 million, because it is huge on your people, your operations, your machines, your trucks. There's so much that goes into it. But if your mindset and your leadership team is not aligned up front, trouble is on the horizon. And it also, if you don't have people in the right seat, if you have a sales leader that should probably be in operations and they're not really the person that should be in sales, it may be okay at 5 million a year, but it won't be okay at 50 million a year.
Exactly.
And I love that you're working with people that way. And are you doing this through like a long-term program? What do your programs look like?
One, we do one-on-one consulting. So that's where we really need to get in there, more of a VIP day situation and build out a roadmap. And then the second is it's typical that we're on a 12-month journey. Most of our clients are honestly have been on a 2 and a 3 year journey. So it takes time. I think that transformation takes time. This is a marathon. And exactly what you had just said, working through, depending upon where the current state of the organization is, working through it, it's a realistic, viewpoint to say, I'm in this for the long run.
One of the questions I have for you, just from my own experience, is a lot of times I see people, they're really fired up at first, right? The first 3 months, they have like this inferno, we're going to fix everything. And then the hard work starts. And month 6 through 9 or 12, things start to like curtail a little bit, where some people maybe are still really engaged, but it's just a lot of things going on in a business and you get pulled other directions. How do you work around that? Because that's one of the biggest things I see is that first fire turns into a little ember and then it kind of dies. And then they come back full circle to where like, oh, we got to fix this again. How do you get that sustained engagement from your clients?
Yeah. So I think it's honestly, this really comes from how my operating system for me personally. You have to identify right from the start, what are your core values of this business? Why are you doing this? Is it retirement? People don't just go into business to go into business. There's something there and you have to usually pick it up. And then the third part is, what are your non-negotiables? Your non-negotiables are, what are you going to protect about you, your family, your relationships, your health, that it's like, you will not let entrepreneurship creep into that to where now you're burnt out. Now you're exhausted. Now you're going through a divorce. You hear all of this.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about right from the beginning, number one is you just need to mentally build yourself a roadmap, and you have to give yourself milestones. And you've got to always go back to that core, because it's going to get hard. Like, Stephanie, let's look at this. For the next 90 days, one of my favorite books is The 12-Week Year. I always operate every 12 weeks. So for the next 90 days, we know that this is the milestone that we're going to hit. We're going to feel so good about that. This is what we're working towards. And these are the steps we're going to take. Don't worry about all those bigger things that we have to. These are the dominoes that are going to move. And then we're going to move to the next one and move to the next one. In between there, it comes down to taking care of yourself. It comes down to my clients taking care of themselves. We don't celebrate just, profitability, milestones financially that they've hit. We celebrate the fact that, gosh, we've had this a couple of times. Your spouse, unfortunately, has been diagnosed with cancer. And now you can take time off to be able to be with that person. That's happened multiple times. Your children, you get to go take them on vacation for 2 weeks and go travel the world, and your business is being taken care of.
It's huge.
Exactly. You cannot look at just attributing all of your success to something financial. It has to go within your core. That's what gets you up for work every day. That's what keeps you going. That's what you put on the wall to say, you know what? Damn it, this is why I'm working so hard. I want that. That is my ideal life.
So you talked a lot about not just having financial goals. And I think it is really easy when you start in entrepreneurship to sometimes have this whimsical idea of, I'm quitting my 9 to 5 and I'm going to have time to do whatever I want and I'm going to have freedom. And maybe there are some businesses that are that way. I have not identified those yet, because to build a really strong business, most of the time, unless you have a lot of money up front to invest in people, and it's you're going in with a huge team. If you're starting this ground up, you're probably going to be working a lot of hours, and it's going to be a lot of you and maybe a core team of people doing a lot. And burnout is real. And there are a lot of things that get put on the back burner because the business does come first. And I think that's a great point to talk about. Once you get to this moment where you are scaling, you may have been in that whole, drive as fast as you can, as far as you can by yourself for years. I mean, it could have been 5 years, 10 years, however long. To release yourself from that and be able to say, I'm going to go on a vacation for 2 weeks and not have to spend 8 hours a day on the computer checking emails or worrying about my phone. that is such a freedom that I think most entrepreneurs and even business leaders in a large company, a lot of times they long for. And I would say most of my clients that I talk to, that is just as important to them as the money. I think, we see a lot of things on social media about like, I made $2 million in 3 months on Instagram. And maybe that's real for some people, but it's a grind to get to a point where you're making 6-7 figures every year and your business is profitable. And I think that's something we don't need to lose sight of is victory and winning is not always just dollars and cents. It is a lot of times it's impact for a lot of people. It's freedom. It's time. It's not having to do things you don't want to do. I mean, work with people you don't want to work with, those types of things. And I just want to make sure we talk about that. How do you keep burnout at bay? You have these values, but even with that, you're still driving towards something. And I know we've talked about this personally a lot. It's really hard for high achievers to not push it past the limit of where you're like going too far. What is the biggest thing in your life that you do to hold burnout away from your business?
Yeah. Wow. There's so much I can say. So one of the things I jokingly say, my husband calls me a Sour Patch Kid, where it's like, oh, she's sweet, but man, I'm a little sour. I'm a little sassy. Here's where I'm going to get sassy for a moment. Number one is I would call BS on that all day long, Stephanie, because there is, when you walk into entrepreneurship, one of the things that both of us have learned is you have to understand there are vanity numbers and there's what you see on social media.
Yeah.
Girl, you get yourself behind closed doors. And like you, I'm that person that's like, you know what? My goal is I want to be the small fish in the big sea. So put me with the multimillionaires, running those businesses as I'm starting out. This is where the BS comes into play. They are crying behind the scenes. They are burnt out. There are people running multi-million-dollar businesses that are making $40,000 a year. So you don't see so much of that. So what happened for me was, as I was growing, my little fish was growing in these entrepreneur spaces. I would look around and I was like, no, that is a non-negotiable. I will not conform to that. So how I keep myself grounded, and I have no problem telling people that, because as a high performer, you hear numbers like that. I did a $200,000 launch. I did this. So when you perform, you're like, oh my word, I suck. I didn't meet that. Like, what's happening? You have to define, number one, what does success mean to you? And that needs to be what grounds you for the burnout. So for me, my relationships, I have my faith. My religion is very important to me. My husband, my children, my friendships and experiences. Those are and my golden retriever. Those are you too.
The
golden now.
This is for me.
Yeah.
I said above that just to be nice.
I actually literally was like, okay, Laura, put those in order the way that you should. And it was like, oh, I don't know if that's the right order. But anyways, when it comes down to it, it's that and just like yours, my husband is a high performer as well. There's two alphas in a relationship right here. And you have to prioritize things like, for us, date night happens every single week. It's a non-negotiable. The electronics go on. We were just for Valentine's Day, had this romantic dinner and we're candlelight and we're talking about business. And I was like, oh no, we got to get control. Go to the restroom, Laura, come back, give him a kiss. Baby, we're not going to talk about business anymore. And you have to be strong to say, we're doing it. Here we are. You are prioritizing your business over saying no to going out with girlfriends. You are prioritizing your business and not going for a hike. You have to be able to build that self-confidence and that accountability for yourself to say, my business is not me. I am separated from my business. There's a Laura's life and goals that I'm building. And the business is the way that I will help get myself there, among other things. And what I see happen so much is entrepreneurs, especially when you're coming as a solopreneur, you define your worth through your business.
Yeah,
it's a trap. Yeah, you become obsessed. And what ends up happening is you forget your hobbies. You forget what lights you up. You forget that you don't have to, Jason and I just got done. We were at a beautiful spa for 3 days. You're not going to see it on social media. Who cares? Because I have no camera by me. I was just in the moment, and you forget to live with intentionality everywhere.
Yeah, I think judging yourself by what you see others doing, and especially when, like we said, that's not necessarily real. There are a lot of times that I've thought, well, if I could just do what this person did, you mentioned the $200,000 launch. Well, if you spent $300,000 on ads to get that $200,000 launch,
As
winning the person that did 20,000 with no ads, or the person that did 200,000 and lost 100 grand. And there's a lot of that goes on, and there's nothing wrong with ads. I'm not downing those people. It's just, when you drill down to what these businesses are actually doing, when I look around, the businesses that are really making the most money are usually the least shiny. They're usually the businesses that are doing boring stuff like plumbing, roofing, things that aren't illustrious and like on Instagram looking awesome. It's not they're living in Bora Bora working on their laptop. It's like they're doing stuff that no one else wants to do, and they're making a shitload of money doing it. And they're hopefully have a team of people that they can go and enjoy their life with that money. My dad had a lumber business, and like it wasn't glorious and glamorous, and it was still really hard, but he made a really great living doing that. And I know a lot of people in those types of businesses. So I would just say to people that are not sure what you want to do, don't always go towards the shiny light. Like the thing that you should do as an entrepreneur is, number one, what are you passionate about? And maybe you aren't passionate about a plumbing business, but can you live and do the things you want to do with that type of business? And can you make an impact? Maybe that's what it is. You want to, like you said, help people. How many people in your community could you help with this type of business? How many people in your life that you know and love? And then the other thing is, think about what you want long term, because this business doesn't have to be the thing you do by itself forever and ever and ever. Like once you get started and get some, great profits going, you might can have a second business that's whatever it was you wanted to do it that was so shiny and glamorous. You'll be able to do other stuff. So people get really, I think, center focused on one thing, and that's revenue. And revenue matters. Like it does. You can't run a business without it. But if it's at the cost of you and your health, it's too high. And so I think there's a balance, and it's really hard to find as an entrepreneur. I struggle with it every single day. I love business. Business is my sport, and I've always felt that way since I was a little girl working in my dad's lumberyard. So I feel like if that's what you like and you enjoy that, do it. But if it's not, then find a way to, make it work for you. And then I'll just say, maybe you shouldn't have your own business right now. Go work for corporate. There's nothing wrong with that. Like there is zero wrong with having a W-2 job. And there are a lot of days it is easier in every aspect of the word to have a W-2 job than to be an entrepreneur. So don't feel like you're a loser if you don't have your own business. You see all this stuff on social media that makes you feel like if you're not up doing like cold baths and like 7-mile runs and having a $5 million business by 9 a.m. that you're a loser. Life is about more than that. It's about so much more than that.
My husband and I, we, ringing in the new year, and we were driving home. We were in the mountains and driving home, and we reflected on all of the greatness and the blessings of 2023 for us. Mm-hmm. I promise you, Stephanie, the one thing that we both said is, what we gained the most of? Time.
Yeah.
How? You can't buy time back. Yeah. And we said it was time. It was experiences. Now, as we continued to go, we were like, we have more in our savings. We have more in investments. We financially made out really well. But because we stayed so grounded and so focused in specific areas, and the key is you speed up. And you know this about me. I took Q4 to slow down. Yeah. I was like, this is a marathon. People burn out because they don't understand that entrepreneurship is a mental game. They think it's, going to be glamorous. And I saw that it was like, there's been a lot that we've been through. My kids are now, pre-empty nesters. We're working towards this. I'm moving into another season of life. I have to respect that season of life that I'm working through. And how does my business work parallel to that? So for me, it was like, let's slow down for just a moment. Cause we were just talking about this, I'm multiple 6 figures. I've closed my first $1 million organically all on my own. That took a lot of, pun intended, a lot of grit. Well, my body, my mind, I need to slow down for a moment because there's no way I'm going to get past that 7 mark if I keep going. Yeah. So you have to understand, what are you measuring? And then how do you give yourself grace to say, Stephanie, take a little break for a moment, hon. It's okay. And if that is even taking a job, I've had friends that have closed their business and they took a job because that was what fitted their next season of life. It doesn't mean that they can't go start again in a couple of years.
And you may learn something or have a relationship from that job that lets you do something you couldn't do before. And that's the thing I think people miss is some of the lessons I learned in my last 5 years at corporate, I could not do what I'm doing today had I not had those lessons and those experiences and the failures and the wins and all those things combined. It is the reason I am like I am. And so if I had done this in like 2012, when instead of leaving my dad's business and going to corporate, it would have been very different. I don't know how it would have turned out, but I know that who I am right now is very different than who I was then. So I am grateful for that time and those lessons and the relationships that I built that now are a lot of my clients, from that time. So it's huge. One thing I wanted to ask you about is with your leadership and performance development, all of the things that you're doing, are there any tools that you're using or like emerging trends that you're seeing that you just really love? I know you referenced the 12-hour work week, which is a really great book. And I think breaking that down into bite-sized time instead of having these huge lapses of in 12 months and 3 years and 5, it's hard for our brains to focus on that. Very easy to focus on a few weeks, 12 weeks as a time measure. But other than that, what are you using with business owners that really works that you would say, hey, if I was going to tell you something today, Steph, to go try, this is what I would do?
It hands down, I would say behavioral assessments. It really is. I focus a lot on emotional intelligence and helping to build that and build self-awareness and self-regulation. Well, that's the hard work, right? So it's hard to pick up a book. It's hard to jump into your business and say, okay, I want more emotional intelligence. What is that? It really comes down to being able to use behavioral assessments. And I know you love StrengthsFinder.
Yeah.
You get the behavioral assessments to work on the inner part of you and your team. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my triggers? What are my limitations? That is I crack the code right there. It makes the business, it makes the vision, it makes the communication so much easier.
Yeah. And the EQ test is what you're referring to for the emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That one's really cool. I did that one a few years back, and it's that and Myers-Briggs. There's so many. And StrengthsFinder, one of them. I like that tool. But I've done every one and I like my results from all of them because they teach you something different every time. One kind of hones in on something else. There's Caliper, there's Hogan assessments. I think they're all really powerful tools. And the more you have that whole view of yourself and then your team, it's really powerful.
The 3 that we use, number 1 is I think it's also to just take it down to its most simplest form and use it for a tool. It doesn't define you. It doesn't define your team members. So the one that we start off always is DISC. It's very easy to understand. It's very easy to put it into the workplace. The next thing, a favorite that our clients love is an energy rhythm. And that helps you to identify just your natural circadian rhythm. So when is the time where we all have it? Thank heavens we're doing this podcast early in the morning, because if you get me at 3 o'clock, it's like, what in the world is Laura going to say? I am at my most, productive self in the morning. I'm not going to put those high leverage activities or high client calls after 2 or 3 p.m. on my calendar for that reason. So being able to understand that, I think that that's definitely a big one. And Enneagram is a really popular one as well, too.
Yeah.
But I think it's also comes down to, and I know you're passionate about this as well, we have got to be, the older generations, we have got to be willing and proactive about learning how to communicate and bring multi-generations together. Because when we have with our clients, if we have Gen Zs coming into the workforce, we have millennials, and we do not know how to communicate. We don't understand what motivates them. We don't understand what they're looking for. Well, what's the first thing where we say? People don't want to come to work. People don't want to do work. And yes, I know that's a challenge that we have right now, but a lot of it is people don't want to come work for you. People don't want to burn out. The younger generation is showing us, hey, you all are showing me how to burn yourselves out. I'm not doing that. Let's figure out another way. So I think that's such a competitive advantage that business owners can really learn and be educated on so that they can really build this workforce to build these, thriving legacies.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And especially in construction. So in the construction industry, I've seen this time and time again where we have very little thought about the next generation, how we're going to educate these people, how to retain them. We know we need next generation workers, but we don't really understand how to even get them to want to come work here, more or less stay 5 years, 10 years, and run the next leadership teams or whatever we're trying to do with business franchises, anything like that. And I really believe that we have to listen to the data. These millennials, which I am, and Gen Z are telling their employers, we want to prioritize development. We would rather have quality of life. We are not like boomers and Gen X when we work 80 hours if you'll give us an extra $500 a week. We're not going to do that. And so we have to think about that when we're thinking about how do we structure jobs? How do we structure training? And that's one thing that Ben and our team are working on really hard is trying to figure out what is that training going to look like where we have something to offer the construction industry that is a program, has all those, behavioral assessments, all that kind of wrapped in, and then also has some tactical, technical training. Like, why is a 2x4 not actually 2 inches wide? It actually measures, less than that, 1.5 inches. These types of weird questions that you don't even know exist until you're in the industry. So it can't be understated that we have to prioritize training. And I know that you're doing a lot of training. I'm doing a lot of training. We both have a heart for that, but it's not just hey, we should do this because it's the right thing. It's a business investment. And if you choose not to do it now, your business will not thrive like it would in 5 years, 10 years. It may not even be around because there may be no one to take it over because you haven't trained your next generation.
Wow. Yeah, I think you hit on so many important points. And I honestly I hate to bring it up, but another variable here that we have to take into consideration is people's mental health. So, especially with the younger Gen Z coming out, and I'm very open about my story. I am the mother of a child that does have some challenges with mental illness and is in the trade work doing this. So I see it literally from so many different perspectives. My parents have a franchise. Doing trade work. I have it now from a perspective of my child. If we don't prioritize training, we don't really take into consideration to build a user manual with videos and a hands-on shoulder-to-shoulder training and have open communication where if one of the team members, one of the technicians is like, I had no idea what to do, so screw it. I'm just going to go home. I'm exhausted. You just worked me 60 hours a week. If you don't take those into consideration, you're shortchanging your business because you're going to have constant turnover. Each one of those employees is going to cost the business money. So it's taking corporate practices. It's just taking basic fundamentals and saying, let's do some, surveys and ask our employees about their well-being or, how do they prioritize their personal life and what is maybe too many hours for them to work? And these aren't the questions. I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
Asking them what they care about, not this big survey of like the entire world. What matters to people in your organization, in your town, in your, company? That's important.
Well, one of the things that we teach in our program is that we love marketing. Like I absolutely just admire people like you that are teaching great marketing strategies. When you're thinking about attracting customers to your business, you're asking all of these questions. What is it the need? What do they want? What do they value? What do they appreciate? Why are they going to keep coming back? All that good jazz. Well, we forget that those same practices are just as vital for your internal clients, which are your employees. Absolutely. You need to understand exactly why did they come to your business? What's keeping them there? So stay interviews are really great for that. What do they value? What do they prioritize? How do they feel appreciated? If you can't answer those basic questions about every one of your team members, a good place to start is right there, is to say, I'm now going to invest just as much, not as much, but I'm going to invest a good amount of time in my internal clients as I do my external clients. And then you build your roadmap from there.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. And I think a lot of times we do focus way too much on the outward and not on the inward of our company and our people. And knowing that our competitive advantage usually is our people. There's some competitive advantage in technology and products, but usually in most businesses that I see, they're all selling very similar products. They pretty much have the advantage of what are their people doing for their customers and how are they running the business. That's the advantage. So if you don't take care of that, you are really going to lose in the long term. You either pay now or pay later.
Absolutely. You're so cute.
I'm so excited that you got to share your journey and your amazing business. And I know there's probably a lot of people listening that might think this woman is amazing. I want to work with her. Talk to me a little bit about how someone would get in touch with you. I know you're on LinkedIn, you're on Instagram, but you have your website. What is the best way to get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you?
Absolutely. Any and all of the above. My website is thriveandperform.com. You can simply submit a contact form. We can get connected. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's probably my number one platform. And also share some newsletter tips and great best practices for business owners. So just drop me a DM and we absolutely can be in contact.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I always love spending time with you. Wish this had been in person in some amazing location, but we're going to make that happen very soon. We have been talking about it for a little while, so we have to do it soon. But thank you so much for your time today. And we will talk to all of you on the next episode of the Grit Blueprint.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Bye, everyone.